My name is Val Allen. I know a lot of you because I see the names popping in here. Thank you so much for coming out. It's so great to see your names out there. And I'm so anxious to share this presentation with you on my love of abstraction. It's been an amazing journey for me, and I'm hoping to take some more people along with me. And even the realists, I think you're all going to get something out of this as far as composition and just ideas on how to start paintings in a little bit different way, or printmaking, whatever you are working on. So it's going to apply to all of the art mediums out there, as you will see. So I'm going to share my screen here. So my studio practice includes abstraction, non-representational, and disrupted realism. And I'm going to explain each one of those types of work that I do personally. So I work intuitively for my preliminary stages, and then I shift into an intentional design decisions. So I've been a lecturer and an arts material advisor since 2005. So hopefully I can find some answers for you to questions. If not, I have a community of artists that I work with, and between us all, we can figure out just about anything. This is my downtown studio. It's on 5th Street. It's in Geisler Enterprises. This space is considered a business. I think of it as a business and art incubator. It's where people go to start new ideas, to launch new ideas. And for artists, it's just a wonderful, industrial, gritty, messy place to work. And I am a messy painter. As you can see by the floor there, I use the floors, the walls, splashing everywhere. And I just really love it. So all my supplies are pretty much down there, but I also have my Zoom studio. And this is where you're seeing me coming from today, is the Zoom studio. And so I've got it set up with different cameras and different ways that you all can see me. Okay, so there we go. I'm a certified golden working artist, and so I have access to tons of supplies. And like I said before, lots of answers, because we now manufacture acrylic, watercolor, and oil paint. This is some example of my recent work. I'm working, these are larger. They're 40 by 60, and they are on stretched canvas. And they're also mixed media. They are collage work. The brown areas you see are actually craft paper. And I was happy to discover that I'm able to collage on stretch canvas, because now that opens up a whole world of easy transportation, because stretch canvas is much lighter. And also I can carry it by myself, which I really love that part. Here's a couple of new works, started out as collage, covered up then with starched cheesecloth, which is a very, if you haven't tried it before, it's just a very fun material to work with. It's used in the printmaking world as tarlatan. It's used to wipe down etching plates. And it's a very crisp cheesecloth that then you can collage onto your paintings. And I love working with it. Now, I mentioned in the very first slide that I work in abstraction, non-representational, and disrupted realism. This painting I consider an abstraction. And the reason I'm calling it an abstraction is because I am abstracting something in the world. I'm abstracting Greek architecture. So, but I'm abstracting it so much that I'm changing the direction, I'm changing it structurally, I'm adding movement, I'm adding diagonals, and I'm adding tons of texture. And so it is not something that you could walk out and point to and say, that's where Val was. It's totally abstracted. My next example are works that what I consider non-representational. So these are encaustic monotypes that I started in my studio on my encaustic printing press, which is a great big components of light bulbs underneath a metal plate. So these are pretty large. These are 29 by 41 each. And I'm using encaustic sticks as and I melt them on top of that metal plate. And I can draw with those sticks almost like crayons, which is kind of what I started melting crayons in my bedroom back in my third grade, I think it was. It's crazyville. But anyway, I can draw with these crayons and then lay down the printing paper on top of the molten wax and pull it off again. So I start out again, very, very intuitively, no rhyme, no reason. I'm putting the wax on, but then as I progress through the work, I'm able to fine tune the intentional design elements because it's an additive process. I can dip the paper down in the wax one time, add some design elements such as circles or straight lines, and lay it down again and back and forth. So it's a mixture of printmaking and painting at the same time. I love to work that way. And then my final example here is something that I call disrupted realism. Now this, you can recognize that it is definitely static architecture, and you could walk out to that scene in Southern Ohio and find this distillery and look at it at that same angle. So it's disrupted. It's beyond, it's not abstracted per se, other than abstracted elements. It's disrupted because I'm using abstraction to disrupt the realistic image, but it's definitely realism. So I feel that's where a lot of you realists out there could use some of those types of elements in the work that you're doing today even. This was done on a 9 rigid panels. And I don't know if you can remember back at that first shot of my downtown studio, you can almost see grid patterns of paint splashes on the floor. That's where this piece was started, on the floor. And I used a broom and buckets of water and high flow paint and just went at it, let that all dry, and then put the implied realism on top of that. Now, in my class, I'll be talking a lot about principles of art. And it's something that is an underlying, they're not rules, they're just principles. They're things, they're anchors that you can go back to as you're creating your work. So we have line, texture, shape, form, color, value, and space. And again, we can use these to start our intuitive thoughts and then really rely on them when we start to move into our intentional design of our work. So we can be as free and loose and abstract in the beginning stages of our work, but sooner or later, we're going to have to come back with some intentional design work. And these elements will be very helpful. I'm just going to scroll through them to emphasize this again, because in the class, there will be emphasis on each one of them in detail. Look at this texture one. Isn't that fun? I love texture. And shape, where you start getting your triangles and your circles, moving on to form, where you're actually adding volume to the shapes to give them 3 dimension. And then color is wild as this, vibrant, or as muted as grays and blacks and whites and neutrals. But that becomes a huge principle. And with color, you must, as you're finishing up paintings, think about value. You know, where are your pops of high contrast? Where is your black meeting the white, which is going to be hopefully very close to your focal point? So in color world, that would be, where is your navy blue stacking up against your pale yellow, because your eyes are going to be drawn there. And where are the muted grays, maybe in the background, being the soft sage greens and the soft Payne's gray blues. And then space, the illusion of depth, the air around your paintings. abundant air, I like to think of it, can that happen? Or is it very, very dense? Think about what kind of space you're trying to create. And in a way, when you're working with those principles, and I just kind of mentioned it with dense or airy, that goes back to a very intuitive feeling. So it's a mixture of intentional with intuition. I'm going to focus today on line. In this mini class, I'm going to call this. In the mini class, we're going to work on line. But before I start any demonstrating of that, I want to talk about some artists, modern artists that worked in line and emphasized line. Now, Pablo Picasso was known for, I didn't realize this, he was the inventor of the one line drawing. Now, he does break the line here, but a lot of you are very familiar with Picasso's line drawings. They are so, I'm going to call them pure and so beautiful and elegant. They're extremely elegant. And there's so many that you can see on the internet as well as museums. But the one line drawing, so his emphasis on line is huge. Mark Tobey. So Mark Tobey is considered a modern artist, as is Picasso. Now, modern artists are the artists who worked primarily between the years of 1900 up to the late 1960s. So that time period with all of the isms, the cubism, the pop art, all of the different categories of art, abstract expressionism, those happened between the 1900s to the 1960s and late 60s, and it influences to this day, it influences me, absolutely. And when I go back and think about these artists and look at these artists again, I get extremely energized and thoughts just coming in and out of my mind. Mark Tobey does that for me. Mark Tobey with his white drawings, his white lettering, absolutely amazing. And the depth that he gets, you know, this automatic writing over and over. He was very influenced by Asian calligraphy and different cultures. He traveled the world. You can see that history and that culture intelligence just coming through with his work. And I get very, very excited when I see work like this. It's akin to Jackson Pollock, but it's a little more refined, I feel, than Jackson Pollock. And I'm sensing a lot of history in this work, as if I could almost like a beaded veil walk through all of these white markings and get back to that underpainting, which has the beautiful deep blues and reds. It's very exciting for me to think about how he created that painting. And by thinking about it, I get fired up to do my own work. Roy Lichtenstein. Okay, so he worked in line, cartoon line, very much like a still animation. And I picked this one because I thought it was relevant. Maybe he became ill and couldn't leave the studio. And I know some people that have been, you know, this time period where they have been in their studios. Now, for artists, that is kind of a good thing in a way. I know it can be troublesome, but if we could be in our studios during this time, it's a very good place to be. So Roy is considered one of the modern artists. But I'm going to introduce you to a contemporary artist because I feel that's a link that is missing when I take different classes or workshops. And when I teach classes or workshops, I try to bring up a contemporary artist, not a ton at one time. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. It's like going to a museum and trying to take in the whole Metropolitan Museum of Art in one day. No, concentrate on one room in one day, and then you'll absorb. So I'm just going to concentrate on one contemporary artist. I'm going to recommend a TV show, Art 21, where you can see examples of her work and many others, beautiful videos. And also, Julie was recently featured with Christine Amapora on CNN. was last year. So you can Google that and see that wonderful interview. I became familiar with Julie's work around 2014. That's when she was hitting the scene down at in Miami at Art Basel, and she a piece of hers was purchased down there for 5.5 million. So I would say she's considered one of the 1%ers of the contemporary art world. But look at this painting. It's huge and it's layered, and it comes up from very gestural graffiti style marks. You get into some calligraphy style marks. You get into full-on architectural rendering, and then the play of color. And remember, I talked about space and how luscious and open her space is in this, drawing you in with this one-point perspective. It's just beautiful. Julie Moreno. Now, here's some surprising things. She was born in Ethiopia, 1970. She grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. And she says of East Lansing that as a young girl, she was in a very international neighborhood. Now, a lot of you know Michigan State, and that is a very international college. And so she grew up in that climate and just learned so much about different cultures. So I'm going to read this part. I don't usually read in PowerPoints out loud because you can read it, but I feel it needs emphasizing. So Julie is inspired by a variety of sources, from cave paintings, cartography, Chinese calligraphy, and 17th century landscape etchings, architectural renderings, graffiti, and news photography. Drawing on this vast archive, Moreno explores how realities of the past and present can shape human consciousness. And then, as she says, her visual language represents how history is made one layer on top of another, erasing itself, consuming itself, and inventing something else from the same thing. Now, if that doesn't get you fired up to do a painting, I don't know what will. For me, it's just wonderful to hear that statement, because a painting is about history, either your personal history or a timeline history, or looking back on things that have passed and cultures that have come and gone. It's about history. So I want you to take that to heart as well. I love it. So I am now going to switch the camera, and because I'm going to do some demos now on how I start paintings and what's going through my head, just to give you an idea. Okay. So here we go. It takes a minute for the camera to show up, but soon you'll see it. There you go. So here's my workstation so you can see what's going on. So I'm going to start with the idea of intuitive underpainting. And to do that, I'm going to show you 3 examples of different ways that I like to start underpaintings. This would be the first layer, or if you want to think about it in the history world, this would be the first hour of the painting on the timeline. And I'm going to use this color, one of my favorites, Pyro Red. I use it in a lot of my underpaintings. So let's get this out here. I'm working on an 8x8 canvas square panel, easy breezy. And I go through a lot of these. In the class, we'll be working on 12x12 panels, so just a little bit bigger. And this is a faster drying acrylic, because I do want this to dry fairly quickly so that I can work on it today. All right. I have a brush already loaded with some water, and I'm just going to go for it. So what I'm doing is I'm getting into something artists call the zone. This is my time period to get into the zone, calm myself down. There's no right or wrong way I can paint this on at this point, but I'm getting the feel of my paintbrush on the canvas, and it's kind of transporting me to another world. And that's what I like about art. I like to get in the zone, get in the flow, because it just takes, the time becomes irrelevant. You just don't even think about it. Wonderful place to be. Okay, I'm going to see if I can get this lady in the waiting room. There we go. Now, so look how vibrant that red is. This is a color that is manufactured. It's what we call a modern color. It's manufactured in the lab. This isn't a pigment that you can dig up like cadmium red. It's manufactured in the lab, but it is a very safe pigment to use as opposed to cadmium red, which if breathing it would not be good. Not to say you can't use cadmium red, because you can. Once it's in the binder, it's not going anywhere. But I sure wouldn't try to make my own cadmium red, that's for sure. But the pyro red, I'm using a lot in my work. So now I'm going to grab a piece of charcoal because I'm going to draw into this right now. And again, my principle of art that I'm focusing on today is line. So I'm still in the intuitive mode. So I'm not really thinking about what this is going to be at this point. I'm just adding history. If anything, I'm probably thinking at this point, maybe landscape. Because look, I'm implying a horizon here. So maybe I'm doing an abstracted landscape. It certainly isn't disrupted realism because this is pretty raw right here. And now let's move into some architectural forms. Portals, windows, towers. These are some of the things that go through my mind when I'm working. You know, I had the pleasure of performing with the painting, I guess you call that performing, with the Saginaw Symphony. And I had to, that was totally intuitive based on the music. But the music was, went from classical to very contemporary symphonic music. And it just reminded me of being in New York, being in the urban world. So that painting, those paintings went very urban. And it's kind of how this painting is going right now. Okay. So this would be an underpainting, and this would be a way that I could start a painting right here. Now, another way I could start a painting is, and bear with me. This is a Matisse, a play on Matisse that I did. And this is a very textured underpainting. This is light molding paste mixed with a teal color. And you just trowel that on with a palette knife and you just let it dry. And there's so many different materials you can use to add texture. Coarse pumice gel. You could use micaceous iron oxide. If you come to one of my lectures that I give throughout the Midwest, in fact, I'm probably due to start scheduling starting in April around this area again, you would see a bunch of these gritty products that you could get your hands in. And they're just, you can just take them right out of the tube and apply them to your canvas. Now, this painting has this as the underpainting behind it. And it's so worth it to have that as the underpainting, because you get these little areas right here where that little bit of teal is peeking through that is so valuable to a painting. That's where the history comes in. These touches of patina come in. This would not happen if I tried to paint this on top of this figure. It would not work. It just would look like I was patching something up. It would not look as beautiful as it does by peeking through. I hope that makes sense because I just love working that way. Now, another way in abstraction is to prepare an underpainting of metallic and how rich that can be. And this is an easy process that we'll go through where we're taking tissue paper painted with iridescent gold, and it gives the illusion of gold leafing. So I can then collage it on top of a red underbase and come up with this beautiful surface that I could then start painting on. This is actually a stencil that's done underneath to give the illusion of a peacock feather. And let me show you on this board right here. This is another one of those stylized Matisses, but this is iridescent gold. And iridescent gold is not as porous as other paint. It's non-porous. So your paint on top becomes very watery like, very much like a watercolor wash on top. So those are different ways you can have underpaintings work for you. Let's leave that right there for a minute, because I'm going to jump in now. We've got our underpainting done. Okay. So now I'm going to make some more history. I'm going to take a little plate here. This is called a jelly plate. It's made out of silicone. And this for me is just an idea generator. Sometimes I'll do finished jelly plates, that works of art in their own, but a lot of times I just want to make my own collage materials. And I'm going to grab my deli paper. Go. So I'm using deli paper that you can find at Gordon Foods or anywhere else you want to find it. I actually found this, I believe, at Kroger. It came in big sheets. So it's a parchment paper or deli paper that you're using for baking. And I'm going to be using a slow drying acrylic paint this time. I'm going to work in ultramarine blue. This is where it's going to start to get a little messy, but that's okay. So slow drying ultramarine blue, just going to doll out a little bit of that on this jelly plate. Okay. And there we go. I'm going to work with a brayer. A brayer is used in printmaking, and it will level out my ink or paint. I'm using paint. And it's almost like a rolling pin. And I also use it in my collages to press papers down really hard. So the jelly plate is giving me some give. So I really don't need a printing press. This is a nice portable way to get some quick prints. So let's get this all inked up in a beautiful ultramarine blue. I'm going to get some more out. This is kind of handy because it lays down on the flat so I don't get it everywhere. Got a little more. Oh yeah, that's better. Okay, so I've got a nice even layer. Okay, so our principle of art that we're working on is line. So I'm going to take my painting knife, and I'm not pressing in very hard, but I'm going to start working with line quality, lines of different widths, thick and thin. Again, working intuitively. I'm just making some collage papers at this point. So let's try one that looks like this. And we're going to turn this into one big piece of paper that I'm going to be able to tear up to use in my collage. Okay, so now I'm pressing in. I feel the give of that almost a gelatin style feel, pressing in. And you come up with a print, but let's don't stop there. Let's make a ghost print, which will be a little bit lighter, sometimes even cooler. Very, very neat. Let's do another ghost print. This is almost going to be like a gift wrapping paper by the time I'm done with it. Little overlap. Ooh, yeah. That's pretty cool. It has a look of fabric. And then finally, let's do one more. We'll leave a little plain. Okay, so very ghost-like. So this is going to set up to give me several different ways to tear to cut and use that to collage on top of a painting. So let's start that painting right now. So I'm going to get back to me and the easel. Here we go. Okay, so I have an easel set up here, and I'm going to bring over an underpainting that I started that is now dry, that is similar to the one. You know what? This one's dry already. I'm going to use this one. This is the one you saw me working on. I think that'll make a lot more sense. So I'm going to put that on the easel over here and start this collage. Now, when I said this is going to get a little messy, it is going to get a little messy because these are still wet. So ideally, I would let these dry, but I'm just going to go for it. So I can start tearing these up and thinking about where I'm going to put these on the painting. So I've got a nice little shape there. I'm going to fold right here. I'm kind of using my charcoal lines as a guide right now. This work would be considered a non-representational work at this point, because now, okay. And I'm going to use a product called Soft Gel Matte, basically as a glue. The soft gel consistency is good for when you have heavier fabrics. So I just kind of use it exclusively. Okay, I'm going to wipe my brush off here. It's got a little red in it. Okay. Let's get some of this out here. Oh yeah, okay. So we're going to glue that down. Hold it for a minute. Now, what I like about the deli paper is you can see what's under it, and I feel that's very beautiful. Now, by using this soft gel matte, when it dries, it's going to be, there's going to be a little bit of tooth to it. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's see where this is going to take us. I'm going to do another rectangle. Here's some of the fun things I think about. Like, I can see that perforated edge here. I like that as a design element. That's a different style of line right there. And I like torn edges. And I like cut edges. But I'm going to stick with soft edges here. Let's turn this into a little square. You'll start getting the idea of what's going through my brain when I create these works. I'm going to throw some soft gel right down on the paper. If you follow me on Facebook, you know, I recently put a post up about working with color forms. I think this kind of reminds me of working as a child with color forms, working with all of these different materials and mainly the shapes. So that's starting to work for me anyway. Okay, I'm going to leave a really organic edge there. It's funny, but these types of paintings can be set aside for a while and come back to. So it's not a bad idea to think about doing these little collages once or twice every week and getting a library built up that you can go back to. The two recent ones that I put on Facebook work that way. I had them around for quite a while, and then you just keep working over them and over them until you pretty much obliterate the background and the layers. But man, I'm kind of like it. Okay, so I'm going to do an intersection right here. Let's try this darker one. I'm going to put that one right there. This is going to change the whole nature of the painting before it, of course. This is a red, white, and blue painting, as a matter of fact. That's kind of fun. So very primary. Got that crazy perforated edge again. I can send the excess edges around to the back. And let's go with one more there. I feel like I need a little darkness right there. Push and pull. You know what? I can add that right on top. So it's a fairly quick way to work. And again, you set yourself up with a library to work from later. Got my charcoal again. It's becoming a very geometric painting. But who knows where this is going to go. Now, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you'll probably see this and you probably won't recognize it the next time you see it. But it gives you an idea of how to get rolling with a painting. And that's what I wanted to show you today. So I'm going to head back to the PowerPoint to talk just a touch more. How are we doing time-wise? We're doing pretty good because I want to leave enough time for questions and answers. So let's head back to the share screen here. So the class that's coming up is called Abstraction Now. It's going to be taking all of these things that I talked about in depth, especially the principles of art and the discussion on artists. It's going to start March 16th. It's a Wednesday night, 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to have 4 classes that focus on, I've come up with this mantra in my mind of process, produce, and present, meaning come up with your process, which is exactly what you were watching me do today. I'm processing materials. I'm processing the way that I'm going to do my work. I'm even processing the final composition. But then my job is to produce the work. I can keep it all in my mind and visualize doing the work, but I find I need to produce the work. I need to really concentrate on the physical part. And then finally, present. I present the work, and that is in the form of framing it properly. And more importantly, artists need to talk about their work to other people. It's very, very wonderful that the general public seems to be very focused on artists right now. This has a lot to do with TikTok, for one thing, and all these crazy videos, but they're seeing all of these artistic processes and they're getting fired up and enthused, and they want to get into our brains. So people love to talk to artists. So be so proud that you are an artist and people want to hear about your work, just like I'm talking to you about it today. It just gives you a glimmer into folks' personalities and their lives. And that's what we're hungry for right now. So during the 5th class, we will have a critique session, and that will be the entire session where we're doing just that. We're revealing our souls to our other classmates. Now there's going to be demos included in the first 4 classes. We'll have a summary of modern and contemporary artists, just like I did today. It doesn't take a ton of time of the 2 hours that we're together, but it is very important because I find it for myself as an artist very energizing. And then we'll talk about the intuitive preparations that we went through, and then how we're using the intentional use throughout. You know, abstract artists, a lot of times folks may think that it's just totally random, that we're just going for it. That's where the discussions will help, because there is rationale. And even if it is totally intuitive, there are reasons why you are placing things where they are placed. And it's important to be able to talk about that. So I have an early bird price that's introduced today of 180, and then after March 13th, it'll be 215. And once you register, you'll get a supply list. It's not an overly expensive supply list. And before you even purchase things, I like to talk to you to see if there's something else you want to work in. You may have everything you need already sitting on your studio shelves, and I'll bet you do. So there is a link, and I'm going to put that in the comments here in a minute, that you can, if you decide that you want to do this. I sure hope you do. It's going to be a lot of fun. So another thing I wanted to bring your attention to is Armin Mersman, my husband, he's also an artist. We have a podcast called Art Ladders, The Creative Climb. It's up to episode 17 now. We just did a wonderful interview with the artist Robert Sheffman. Robert Sheffman is an illusionist artist. He's very much into realism with a narrative story, and he's so articulate on his work. He's the past foundations chair for College of Creative Studies down in Detroit, and his work is, it's worldwide known, and he's just so fun to listen to. So if you get a chance, you can find Art Ladders, The Creative Climb on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Anchor FM. And it's all about discover. Our word for the year, we went through several words. I love to have a word of the year. And this year it's discover. And I'm discovering so many new things about technology, new things about art. And I just want to share that with people. It's just fun to share things. So you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Art Ladders, A Creative Climb on Facebook. Instagram, I love Instagram. And then you can email me, and this is easy to remember, ValerieAllenArt@gmail.com.
Thank you for watching, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye now.